In brightest day, in blackest night, all other podcasts tremble in fright. Losers cower before the power. Oranges lust and blues you can trust. Indigos feel and white ones heal. Yellows scare and green ones dare. That sapphire love and black hands glove will rock your foundation without hesitation. Chad and Mark face evil's might. Respect their power, for they'll make you see the light.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Bokelman.
I'm Mark Marble.
And this is the LanternCast.
Episode 288.
That's right. We are talking the return of the first Lantern, which is Green Lantern's issue number 25 and 26. For those of you wanting to talk about the issues within these issues, don't worry, we'll get there. But first, we actually got to cover the content itself. I'm taking 25. Mark is taking 26. I get the Big Beast, which is our extra-sized anniversary issue, which I put in quotation marks. But the story is called The Return of the First Lantern. Writer Sam Humphries, Robson Roca is the pencils. Daniel Henriquez is the inks. Alex Salazzo colors. Dave Sharp letters. Brad Walker, Drew Hennessy, Jason Wright cover. Brandon Peterson variant cover, and then some other people.
The usual suspects.
Oh, by the way, for the record, Final Issue Podcast did talk about my email about what in the world an editor does, and as it turns out, we do have a right to be upset. Just long story short. But if you want to, go listen to that episode. It's actually really good because they also touch on that and tie it into that whole Howard Chaykin controversy stuff that recently happened. You heard about that, right, Mark?
Refresh my memory. I may have, but it's not something that's not going off in my head. The gong when you mention it.
There was a series that Howard Chaykin is doing for Image, and he did a cover of some dude being lynched, and he had genital mutilation and a whole bunch of stuff. So the internet got in a huge uproar about it. It was I believe it was a Middle Eastern man because he had some sort of sign on him that said like Paki or something for Pakistani, Paki, and then he was lynched in front of a public place and genital mutilation. It was a whole thing. So it was very clear in the follow up to all that mess that someone mentioned the idea. Someone from Image mentioned the whole idea of there even being editors at Image was just a foreign concept to them because there shouldn't be editors on creative ventures like that. Yeah. So yeah, it was a whole can of worms. They pulled the cover and apologized. And then the very next day, Howard Chaykin's like, I don't apologize for shit. So yeah, it was, yeah. So it was just a very interesting conversation. But long story short, we do have a right to be upset with the editorial team. Less so. Well, we'll talk about it later. We'll talk about the issues. So here in the story, we open up with Jessica and Simon and Rami / Volthoom. Rami. All right. As Mark likes to call him, Volthoomy.
Thank God, not for much longer though.
They're heading towards the Vault of Shadows, which I was like, as soon as that happened, I was like, wait, this is not at all what it looked like before. And then they mentioned the Vault of Shadows is the sister building towards the Chamber of Shadows. So, well, whatever.
At least they separate it so it's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be on, Oa, which is like the other things I've already seen in the storyline. Nothing that would have originally been on Oa should frigging exist on Mogo.
Right. I'm not going to read any of the narrative bubbles here, but I would like you to know, folks, that this entire issue is undercut or overcut, however you want to put it, by Simon writing a letter to Nazir before he leaves Earth, I guess right around the time the whole Polaris stuff was happening. Basically, he's saying, I'm sorry, we're distant. I'll be back for your birthday. And while all this is happening, this is Nazir's birthday, and Simon obviously doesn't show up because of the events of this issue. But that piece of it is less important than actually what happens here in space. So just so you know, that whole narrative structure is in place. They get to the Vault of Shadows and enter and see a almost
stasis tubes. Almost
stasis tubes / what are those things? When you put like an eyeball or like a being or like a little rat or something, you preserve it. Formaldehyde. Formaldehyde like tubes. These little tubes that are encasing the bones, the remnants of the OG 7 lanterns. One of these little tubes is empty though. So they go in, then all of a sudden halt, and a old beast-like man wielding a ring and a construct sword named Tyrannar. I don't know how we'd want to say that.
Probably Tyrannar, maybe?
That I would lean towards that. We'll get to it later, guys, but this guy is his origins. He's from Tamaran, the same planet that Starfire is from. So I would just go ahead. Tyrannar, is that what you said? Something like that.
We could just call him Ty for short.
So he shows up. Then he notices Baz, Cruz, ha ha ha, my old friends, it's been a long time. And then he notices Raimi is like, wait, you're no Guardian. And all of a sudden Raimi lashes out, takes him down, kind of locks him in some sort of time lock thing because he just kind of freezes in midair. They notice that this guy has a ring, and then 10 billion years ago on the planet Tamaran, we see this guy's origins. He is being brought before the king or the ruler of this particular area on Tamaran because he stole from him. Then Tyrannar loses it and kills everybody. There's not a lot of backstory here, so I'm unsure if he just murdered a bunch of people for the hell of it, or he's being unfairly charged, or what. You kind of get the feeling that there's some shiesty stuff going on here, but there's not a whole lot of information. Suddenly then another ring comes in and says, hey, Tyrannar of Tamaran, you have the ability to overcome great fear. There's a great crisis in the universe and you are needed. And then meanwhile, today, quote unquote, in the Vault of Shadows, Raimi opens the vault, steps in and sees the OG ring. We're talking the ring that was created from the Guardians forming the Great Heart. It's the first ring, the most powerful ring at all, so he grabs it. Meanwhile, outside, Jess and Simon are kind of talking about what they miss about Earth and so on and so forth. We've been in space since the morning we went to go find Dr. Polaris. I miss my sister. I miss my sister too, and Nazir. It's his birthday. I can't believe I'm going to miss it. And all of a sudden, Raimi comes out and is like, I got to show you something. And he tells the story about of the first ring and the first time he saw it. He puts it on and sheds his skin or pops out or whatever. The actual process is not necessarily shown except for he kind of falls to the ground right after he puts it on. But out of this smoke that's rising from Raimi's body comes Volthoom. And then we cut back to 10 billion years ago on the planet. Does this say Yo? Kalu.
Which obviously is related to Brainiac.
Correct. This is one of the OG Kalu planets because I believe Kalu is a star system of a bunch of, it's one of those types of solar systems or star systems where the planets have similar sounding names. Sometimes it'll be like a number and then the same name, but the numbers change from planet to planet, or something like this where it's like Yo Kalu or whatever. Anyways, this woman wakes up. She's late for her job. She shows up. She's getting blamed for a bunch of people. I'm going to report you. I'm going to report you. I'm going to report you. And because you're kind of already under the assumption that it's a Brainiac type culture, it's kind of like, everybody's got to fall in line and has a function and, that kind of a thing. And finally she's pushed over the edge and just says, screw your socks, and throws a fit, gets fired from her job. Then she's, on a hollow call, I guess, with her mom. Her mom's like, so you got fired. This is the third job for this month. How are you going to pay your rent? And blah, blah, blah. And she just kind of hangs up on her mom, goes over to her girlfriend, wife, whatever. Then all of a sudden, Kaja Dox of, how do you zoom in here?
The D.
Yod Kalu. You have the ability to overcome great fear. There's a great crisis in the universe. You are needed. Then over back in our time in the Vault of Shadows, the Jessica and Simon have put Volthoom in a science cell, which he easily gets out of. They're asking him what's going on. What'd you do to Raimi? So on and so forth. So Simon's trying to defeat Volthoom or hold him back, but his ring's not responding. Unknown phenomena. And Volthoom says, I am Volthoom. I am the acolyte of the spectrum. I am my mother's son. And Simon says, impossible. Necron killed Volthoom. Jessica's freaking out. How's he moving through a construct? Wait, that voice. Volthoom says, Necron tried to kill me. Do you think you can do better? He failed. Back down, Lantern. I am on a mission of salvation. 10 billion years couldn't stop me. Simon says, I never quit. Whoever you are, I'm shutting you down. And then his ring goes willpower spiking. And Volthoom says, ring, a dose of pure, unfiltered emotional spectrum for the young Lantern. And then all of a sudden, influx of emotional spectrum, overload, warning Lantern Bass, overload, overload, overload. And then his ring explodes off of his finger. He freaks out, understandably. He's like, my ring, my arm. It's his
shield
tattoo. His tattoo there is lit up.
Yep.
But it's unclear. Are these flecks floating off of his arm? Are they embedded in his arm? I'm not really sure what's happening there. But they look like little ethereal fragments of the ring or something, or willpower. Jessica then attacks Volthoom. Her ring says, Jaybird, insufficient oxygen for human respiration. Simon is suffocating. Jessica says, I know your voice. I was trapped inside a ring with something that called itself Volthoom. Volthoom says, nothing can kill me now, Jessica. I am immortal. And Jessica goes, oh, great, we're screwed. Ring, get us out of here. All I want to do is save my home. Jessica, is that okay with you? Because I need your ring to do it. Not that I need your permission. Activate Travel Lantern. Then all of a sudden, Travel Lantern online. Voice print recognized. Greetings, Volthoom. It has been 10 billion years since your last jump. Jessica says, what? No, ring. Listen to me. Jaybird, lo siento. Conflict with unknown programming. There's something else in here. It calls itself the Travel Lantern. Thanks to Raimi, there's a little bit of Travel Lantern buried deep in your ring, but a little bit is all I need. Travel Lantern, take me home. Initializing trans-universal multiverse jump. You're just like the Volthoom in my first ring. It pushed me to be afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. This ring belongs to me. Travel Lantern, activate. Blocked. Insufficient permission. And he freaks out. Jessica stands up, says, this is my ring. I earned it. You can't take it from me. And then her ring says, Jaybird, willpower spiking. He says, it's mine. She says, ring, get me and Simon out of here. Volthoom screams, Earth 15, Travel Lantern, and Jessica screams, do it now. Travel Lantern, activate. And then Jessica's ring activating. All of a sudden, Simon and Jessica are gone. Volthoom's wondering where they are. and they're being ripped through the multiverse / time. They're all twisty, bendy, weird art constructy, the way you see people when they're traveling through some sort of crazy portal. I think Guardians 2. But that's it. It says next issue, The Betrayal of the Guardians.
And of course, Nazir reading Simon's letter just doesn't really give a shit because Simon just doesn't show up.
Right.
It's like, he's got 3 minutes not to be late for my birthday. Oh, screw him. All right, so let's take. Okay, so where do we begin with this thing? Now, as a story, if you we could preface the both issues with this big umbrella. Like, if you don't really care about banging your head against the wall from questionable continuity things, if you want to move beyond that aspect of it and just read these issues as kind of like stories, they're not really bad at all. but I don't know. First of all, we have Volthoom's ring, which we know shouldn't be anywhere in that place. Because the last time we saw Volthoom's ring, he was pulling it out of Ganthet's throat. So why would it be there?
Well, Ganthet and Sade left and exiled themselves. Maybe they somehow found it after Volthoom was defeated and took it to the Vault of Shadows?
Yeah, I don't know. Don't forget the Guardians were being slaughtered at that point.
Right, but then after that they left. Yeah,
because Sinestro said, "I'm throwing you a bone. You get out of here." Yeah, they could give us a retcon to say that's what happened. Without a retcon, it makes no sense. Besides the fact that he says it's still here, which would indicate that he knows that he knew it was there at one point and it's still there. That doesn't mesh at all because we know where it was the last time we saw it. And we know where it was the last time Volthoom saw it. The same place, down friggin' Ganthet's throat. So there is kind of a problem there with that.
Another thing is this I feel is interesting is this issue of convenience here. So one of the origins for one of the Seven Lanterns is that she's from the third world, right?
Yes.
Instead of the fourth world. So she has to do a New Genesis, Apocalypse, blah, blah, blah. Then we see the other guy who's from Mars. And then we see this guy who's from Tamaran. And then we see the other person who's from Kalu. It's like they're doing this round table of places we're already familiar with in the DCU. Now, do you think that helps in terms of like we can interact with other ancient aspects of the DCU, and these are touch points which we would recognize and appreciate seeing? Or do you think it just muddles things and we may as well just pull random aliens from random places? I can see the third world stuff because, you know, they're going to be going down this New Gods route here pretty soon in the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps title. So in terms of all that, I get that connection. But is it really necessary to tie in Mars, Tamaran, Kalu, so on and so forth?
I don't necessarily know if it hurts. I mean, I could see where they would think that it might not be a bad way to go down the road, at least from looking at it from a planet perspective, to give us planets and worlds that we already know at least a little bit, or the names are going to resonate even if we don't necessarily. If everybody doesn't necessarily doesn't come to mind immediately, but it's like I know that from somewhere, or by the look, you don't have to necessarily even know about the Kolu thing to know that you look at you see that chick and it's like, oh, Brainiac. I don't know if it hurts. I can't tell you that it necessarily helps. I don't. So, but I didn't have an issue with it.
I didn't really either, but I was just wondering if it was necessary and or hinders in any way the story by making sure you have so many touch points to the OG DCU.
Yeah, that's valid. Even though I can't say this bothered me, but it in a way it was very predictable, just based on the way we know about the solicits. We know from the solicits in this, and I didn't read 27 yet, which was the irony of you asking me whether should we do 27, and I said, and it's like, nah, let's stick to. And even when I answered you, I completely forgot. I didn't even bother. I hadn't even picked up 27 yet. I'm going to pick it up tomorrow when I pick up Hal of the Core. But we know from solicits that Jessica and Simon were being sent back in time, and that they were going to end up fighting basically along with the 7 original Lanterns, Green Lanterns, to stop Volthoom. That's basically what the solicits were implying all along. So to have this sole survivor of the original 7 just recognize them, I mean, it's just it's kind of self-serving, because you know why he's going to recognize them, because they were there, they were there back when Volthoom was originally vanquished, that whole Terminator time loop kind of thing again, or seemingly that's what it's implying. So I don't know. It was cool on one level, but I mean, it's to get. But it's also self-serving in another to make Jessica and Simon seem more worthwhile in the Green Lantern mythos. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was predictable, but it didn't do that much. It didn't do that much for me. I kind of like. I like the way Volthoom kind of reconstitutes himself, but it does make you wonder. Even though now I guess it's safe to say he has so much mastery of the emotional spectrum now that his connection is different, and the way he can use the spectrum is different than, because even before the next issue I'm going to do came out, where they already had touched upon the fact that he had the battery embedded in his chest and the Great Heart, and that's why he originally was able to tap into the spectrum. But so I can get how he's moved beyond that and everything. I guess I can kind of accept that he's moved way beyond that now, so he doesn't need it. Because we saw him in Wrath of the First Lantern, he had nothing in him then. He didn't even have his ring.
Right.
So I can buy. I mean, so that didn't bother me. I did like the tying it back into him getting his ring back and having a body back and not being just hijacking Raimi's. I did kind of like the way he was able to use the emotional spectrum in slightly different ways than we've kind of seen before. I was curious about Jessica's reaction to him being Volthoom and her taking that on and recognizing the voice and so on and so forth. Because of the art, and I do like the art for the most part. It is dark, but it kind of matches the tone of the issue, and as well as the physical location too. But I'm also wondering how much Volthoom knows about what happened with that piece of his soul from Earth 3. True.
Because he has this look of sinisterness, or whatever the heck you want to call it, on his face when Jessica is reacting the way she is. Like, he knows why she's reacting the way she is. According to what we've learned several issues ago, the only piece that Volthoom knows about that Earth 3 power ring is that Mordru took a piece of his soul to create the ring, and then doesn't really know for the most part what happened afterwards. He couldn't find what he wanted on that world, so he left. That's it. That's all he should know. But this makes it seem like, I've got your back, Jessica.
Yeah.
Get back here, Jessica. For those who've seen Jessica Jones. But anyways, it made it seem like he knows more than, based on what we've seen so far, more than what he should about that aspect of what was done with that piece of his soul.
I think that's probably a fair conclusion. I think I kind of have an issue, and this will be This will be more prevalent in my issue, but that I'm not getting this whole thing. How I don't know if I would believe that if he had all 7 original Lantern rings, just stuck them all together, I still don't necessarily I would believe that the Travel Lantern would work like it used to, let alone having one friggin' piece of it. I don't know if I'm really buying that. He just has 1/7 of his travel lantern because he has Jessica's ring, and somehow theoretically that was all he would have needed to go back to go back where he wanted to go back home, quote unquote. I don't know if I think that's kind of pushing it too.
Do you think though it was the proximity to the Great Heart Lantern within his chest and the OG ring that was able to activate and then power up those pieces in Jessica's ring, and that's all he needed? Like he wouldn't have been able to just take Jessica's ring. He had to have the added power of his original ring within proximity to the travel lantern, or pieces of.
Maybe. I guess that is another possible explanation. It just seems like the travel lantern itself was kind of relevant as in being all in one piece. Because remember how upset he was when he found out that it was destroyed. It was like, oh, right. I can never go back again. So then all of a sudden, just because one piece of it exists, that's supposed to be enough. Maybe yes, maybe in his mind's eye he thought, okay, if I can get the original ring again, and maybe with my control of the emotional spectrum, then maybe I can use that one. I think it's shaky. I think it's again convenient. Just like we know it's damn convenient that Jessica's got her ring happens to be the only one of the original 7 rings floating around currently. So I don't know.
Anything else about this issue?
I like the art for the most part.
I do like it. It's definitely it's not a massive departure, but it is a departure. So that was interesting. But yeah, especially when you're reading this and the next issue back to back, it's definitely different.
Yes, because the next issue goes back to the more like the standard art, which for some characters it works well. From a bunch of characters it doesn't.
All right, go ahead, man. Take 26.
All right, 26. Now I have the variant cover on this one.
With them like kind of
crystal
dissolving,
eyes floating in space, coming apart.
I actually like that.
I actually like that one too, which is why I kept it. What's the standard cover?
The standard cover is Raimi, kind of materializing a Green Lantern, and then splitting. He's like holding it like a sort of telekinetically between his hands, and then small Simon and small Jessica on either side reaching out for each other.
Yeah, sounds like the variant's better.
Yeah, I really do like the variant.
All right, so this issue, which is 26, is called The First Ring. Sam Humphries writer, Roman Claquette artist. Was that Ulysses Areola? There's a name for you. Colorist, Dave Sharp letterer, Mike McCone and Jason Wright did the cover. Brandon Peterson did the variant cover. And Marino Cotton and Braganza are the editors. So I find it not interesting. He just reminds me of Quicksilver so much in this battle, doesn't he?
He does.
Like a really freaky, power hungry Quicksilver, even though his hair is a little more under control. So we begin on the planet Maltus, home to the Guardians of the Universe. The requisite time frame for everything, and I guess in the storyline, 10 billion years ago. So we have from the journals of Raimi. I like the fact that it does begin on day 0, when you get the intervals of different days to show you how things are progressing or not progressing. So basically, today's the day they basically pulled all their emotions out into the Great Heart, and when they did that, coincidentally, magically, spiritually, the first ring appeared at that time, and when that did, Volthoom reached out to grab it. By the time we get to day 53, pretty much all the Guardians of the Universe more or less have Raimi kind of like sequestered almost, because they're trying to figure out how this ring works. This is what's an interesting undertone throughout, and we'll be curious to see if we actually get this explanation by the time this whole First Lantern stuff ends. That they're making it clear nobody knows where the first ring came from. Nobody knows who sent it. So that's obviously opening the door for another plot point, even if they don't resolve it in this story arc. But it's an interesting one though. They reach the conclusion that the ring, that they talk about Volthoom and how he comes from another part of the multiverse, and then the travel lantern, that they're just trying to figure out everything here, and Raimi's kind of like on the outs because it's Raimi, so he's not really allowed to basically hang with the cool kids as they're trying to figure out what's going on with Volthoom. And again, here's another thing I don't like. They really are going out of their way to make Ganthet look like a dick. And the fact that again, Ganthet of all the Guardians is the one to chastise somebody else about using emotions. So I guess again, this is this whole retcon thing now, where I guess where forget about the stupid Volthoom's ring being down Ganthet's throat as that explanation, which was horrible. But Ganthet has always been the one who's been kind of like more human-like in the way he acted, and then to have him this retcon having him chastise Raimi, because I guess Raimi's now become the new Ganthet as far as being the relatable Guardian. So by day 98, the Guardians have really started to shrink. They can't even reach the top of the bookshelf anymore. And poor little Raimi is struggling to get something in, and Pietro / Volthoom walks by and sees him struggling, so he comes over, hey, you need some help? Let me get that for you. And Raimi points out that he's the only one who kind of is acknowledging the fact that they're shrinking, that all the other Guardians have kind of like not really addressed the issue, and Raimi directly ties it into ever since we banished our emotions, that's what happened. Raimi tries to make some small talk about the ring, and Volthoom just cuts him off real quickly and going, no, to answer your question, they still haven't figured out, how to make it work or anything like that. Conveniently enough, we find ourselves in the room, I guess, where Volthoom first appeared, and when he first arrived, basically through Krona's, or them using Krona's machinery, and to see back, see the past when the universe was created. And Raimi kind of points out that, hey, I'm trying to rebuild this safer. It's not a popular project because of the fact that if I create this, forget about looking at the past. You could look into the future and look at all the future disasters we could prevent. And Volthoom points out, he and his mom were both scientists too, and what about you? And are you one of the most brilliant, scientists here in the Citadel? And of course, Raimi, being Raimi, said, well, if are you asking them or asking me? Because if you're asking me, like, hey, I'm the best, baby. So at this point, Volthoom and Raimi basically decide to form their little partnership, and they begin working to try to figure out the ring together. Now the whole hell of a lot happens for a while. Day 99, day 107, day 121. It all basically comes down to the same point, that the ring still needs more energy to work. Raimi, on that day 121, talks to Volthoom, basically. See, I don't like the way that on some panels Volthoom is supposed to look really youthful, but like on other panels he still looks like an old man.
Right.
Like that panel when the sweat's pouring off him when Raimi's appealing to him. Concentrate on something that really gets a strong emotional reaction out of you, whether it's something that makes you happy or sad or afraid. And that's when he says afraid, we see a panel of his mom trapped under the wreckage, about to die. And at that moment, pretty much the first ring sparks and shoots out emotional spectrum energy. Mostly yellow, it looks like, but it still looks like there's little waves of the temporal waves of the other colors too. What exactly does Raimi do with that gun of his? Is he just trying to measure? Is it like a measuring device? I don't know, because he doesn't blow up the wall, right? Volthoom blows the wall out.
Yeah, Volthoom blows the wall. I think it's a measuring device.
Yeah, I think so too, based on the fact that they talk about the data that they gathered later on. So at this point, even though they just blew a huge wall through the Citadel, Raimi and Volthoom are celebrating because they've finally gotten the ring to work, and they're kind of celebrating. Here's an interesting story, which I think goes back to the origin of the first Lantern issue, when Volthoom was talking about Earth 47, and it's like the closest they could get to the sum total of their innovation of the emotional spectrum was a busted-up guitar, and Volthoom thinks this is really funny, but Raimi just kind of like is all bummed out. And Raimi's like, we just really can't do this. I looked at the data from today. If we keep pushing this, then in order to get more power into the ring, there's a real risk it could kill you. And Volthoom doesn't care. It's like he makes it clear, a parallax kind of like moment there, like that I don't really care. I want this ring. I'd give my life for this ring. This is everything I've been searching for. And then Raimi kind of gets he gets told the story about Volthoom's mom and how his Earth 15 blew up, and he wants the power to go back and not just save his mom, but also to save his planet. And the look that Raimi saw in Volthoom's face earlier when he was being sequestered wasn't boredom as he first thought. It was actually he was afraid. And Volthoom was pretty determined. He said, we can crack this. If we work hard enough, we can understand this mystery. Raimi has an idea, and it's kind of funny on some basic level why the Guardians, conveniently enough, would automatically accept this coming from Raimi. But I guess because it's the Guardians and they're power hungry themselves, maybe the concept of being able to master this ring and maybe make more of them was enough for them to sign off on Raimi's idea, which essentially was, hey, it's like if you continue to help the Guardians, give us permission more or less to do whatever is necessary to master this ring, and as a trade-off, Volthoom would be allowed to take the ring to go back in time, pretty much to save his planet from destruction. So I kind of liked Raimi and Volthoom like marching off victorious. It reminds me like of a Mentos commercial. The Fresh Maker. They're walking off all happy. Is this supposed to be Gansett again talking to him? Or we just don't know?
I don't think so. He's bald on the top of his head.
Yeah, that is true. But this is also a certain period of time, so they're all shrinking. So who the hell knows? But Volthoom Raimi essentially flips this Guardian off. And this is when they come up with their brilliant decision somehow. Even though I love the Guardians and their little surgical outfits, that's just a classic. Shades of the Alpha Lanterns, of course. That they decided they decided to implant the Great Heart inside of Volthoom. Though I'd like to know where the hell it is when he's sitting there recuperating. Why isn't there this big bulge in his chest? And he's recouping there, and Raimi's like, oh, don't talk, just rest up. And he's like, oh, we did great. You're going to be astonishing. How do you feel? I feel filled with hope. And shortly thereafter that, on day 170, we have Super Volthoom flying off in space. Basically now he's able to to use that ring because he's got the direct channel into the emotional spectrum thanks to the Great Heart. Day 196. And then 206. Volthoom just keeps using more and more energy, and he's kind of getting more and more obsessed and more unbalanced, and Raimi is starting to notice this more and more, and he's basically putting the two and two together, that it's the direct tie to the emotional spectrum that's probably making him unstable. We also get to the point, as this continues to go on, they make it clear that Volthoom, more or less, his help as a scientist in this project soon, but right around this point, becomes nil. That now he's just consumed with being the ring bearer and using it for his own personal gain. That whatever scientific knowledge he had that he brought to the table in the beginning to try to unravel the mysteries of this ring, more or less that's off the table now because Volthoom just doesn't care anymore. On day 254, Raimi decides to take Volthoom's travel lantern, and he rolled the dice on trying to see something, maybe call it instinct, call it convenience of plot, whatever you would like. He uses a travel lantern, and he goes to see something that, he didn't really want to see. But what he finds out and he tells Volthoom was, at the end of the day, the reason why his Earth blew up was that Volthoom himself blew it up. Not necessarily on purpose. That in his attempt to try to save that Earth, his Earth, and his mother probably in the process, he went back and more or less, kind of like the whole Anakin thing, self-fulfilling prophecy with Padme, and you try too hard to avoid your destiny, you end up leading yourself right to it. That basically he himself was the architect, literally, of his planet's destruction. And Volthoom, of course, first thinks he laughs because he just thinks Raimi's crazy. It's like, oh, you're just kidding. It's like, no, trust me, I'm telling you the truth. I wish it wasn't the way it is. But there's still so much we could do with the ring, and now Volthoom kind of just comes to the belief that Raimi more or less is out for the ring for himself, and it's like you're supposed to be my friend, and it's like Volthoom, no, I swear that's not it. And he's like, I'm leaving now, I'm taking the ring with me, and where's my travel lantern? At this moment, the other Guardians come in, and they say, you will never have the travel lantern again, surrender the ring now. And now this is the part that I guess really hurts Volthoom, because that It's like, Raimi, you led me, you led me into this trap. It's like, I just wanted to save my home, my mother. And Raimi's really upset. It's like, please, you can trust me. And Raimi just watches Volthoom freak out. You betrayed me, traitor. And for all you Guardian haters out there, the next page or two would be pretty satisfying if you haven't read this issue, because Volthoom just lays into the Guardian something fierce. And we kind of, besides the requisite, Volthoom has gone mad, we have the interesting little revelation which we kind of, I guess, already knew, really. But at least in this retconned universe, there at one point certainly were thousands of Guardians of the Universe, because Volthoom killed hundreds or potentially thousands of them. So the few remaining Guardians kind of like are hidden behind a shield. And they knew at the end of the day that Volthoom was going to get to them eventually, and also because of the power Volthoom had now, it all made sense how he was capable of basically destroying his own planet. Now we have more questionable luck, or Deus Machina, with Raimi deciding to first he breaks. For the fact that he's able to do it so easily is kind of shaky, but he's
he's clearly using Mjolnir, so
yeah, or at least whatchamacallit, the Beta Ray Bills thing, that he basically takes a hammer to the Travel Lantern, because at the very least he's going to deny Volthoom the ability to go to do his time traveling and go back to his and attempt to save and ultimately destroy his planet. But you would think would then mean the planet would still be alive, right, based on this whole train of thought. But depending on the way you look at, again, time travel. So he breaks it, and then he realizes, hey, these pieces are really rich in emotional spectrum energy. So it's like, I can use them to form a new weapon. So basically he uses the fragments to create the original 7 Green Lantern rings. He purposely channels, instead of channeling the entire emotional spectrum, which he thought might have been part of why Volthoom was kind of unbalanced, he decided to just focus in on one part of it, and he decided to use green, the willpower part, because it was the most stable. Kind of makes you wonder how they understood that much about the emotional spectrum when they couldn't really have, up until Volthoom. That's just one of those open-ended things in this. You don't know how much about the emotional spectrum they were able to ever figure out long before the ring was even functional. So, or maybe this was a process of the ring being functional for those hundreds of days. Either way. So Raimi creates these rings. He sends them off into the universe in hopes that they could, find someone that would help them. And conveniently enough, now we get to the planet Alstair in the Antares system. The planet is pretty much dead except for one little brave organism. So which this little green sprout pops up through the rock, and the hope spreads for years and for centuries, and the planet begins to thrive, and we get the first planet elemental, Colleen, and Colleen is called to and by one of the 7 Green Lantern rings, but the requisite, you have the ability to overcome great fear, there's a great crisis in the universe, you are needed. Next issue, what happened to Simon and Jessica?
When we get into the continuity, I don't know how much we want to spoil about the next issue, but there's continuity issues with this that also tie into what happens in some of the reveals of next issue. I'm not sure how much you care about being spoiled about this, so we won't go into it right now. So
I know something about what happens at the end of the issue. That part I read. So, but
okay. Well, I think that's the main part. So I spoilers about TV shows and movies and stuff like that. That's something to tiptoe around. Comics, also something to tiptoe around, but in this case, we're talking about, as we record this, a comic that came out a week ago or more. So it's a comic that's already out. It's not like we got an advanced copy and are spoiling it for people who are keeping up. So, but anyways, we'll just talk about this issue in particular before we move on to potential spoilers for the next issue. That way people can still listen if they don't want to listen to those particular spoilers.
Well said, Chad.
So this is taking place. Well, you destroyed this machine upon your arrival. Krona invented it. How long after Krona peers back in time and is exiled from Maltus thus creating, of course, the multiverse in the first place. Do we think, like, from the point he looks back and then is judged by the Guardians and is exiled to the point that Volthoom shows up, how much time do we think has elapsed? Because it's still shattered. I mean, it's a whole thing. So what do you think? What's the time frame like there? They give us a lot of markers of time in this issue, but not necessarily this piece.
So the question you're really asking is how long between Krona used the machine successfully and the time that Volthoom actually showed up?
Yes.
If there was an see, if I had that first part of the Wrath of the First Lantern, I might give us an idea. At least in that time frame. I'm not entirely. I don't entirely know. I don't.
It may not even matter because Krona creates the multiverse by looking back in time, connecting the dawn of time with the end of time, thus creating, entropy and shattering reality into a multiverse. Volthoom is from a multiverse, but is a time traveler. So it's like Volthoom is from an alternate world, and since he's a time traveler, that's okay. All right, just because of the quote unquote logistics or lack thereof of logistics and time travel in comic books like this, that in a way makes sense. The multiverse was just created for the most part, but it doesn't matter because he's a time traveler, so that's fine. Whatever. The reason I ask, though, is because the Guardians and Raimi, at the very least, treat the fact that he's from an alternate world in the multiverse like it's fact. So if it was only very, very recently that Krona peers back in time and then creates the multiverse in the first place, I'm wondering why they don't have a bigger reaction to Volthoom showing up in the first place. Because this if time-wise, it's very relatively recently that Krona has created the multiverse by accident, but created the multiverse. Volthoom has to be the first solid evidence of the multiverse. Why aren't they making it a bigger deal? Like, everything is obviously focused on this lantern and the Great Heart and blah, blah, blah. And I get why we're focused on that. But the timeline of the DCU, the way it is, Volthoom has to be the first solid evidence of a multiverse. A creature, a living being, completely sentient, capable of his own abstract thoughts, notions. He came in with a freaking travel lantern that's technology that's even beyond the Guardians in the first place, but he's from an alternate world that was, by their estimation, just created. Like, I feel like there should be some overlap here in, like, wanting to focus on Volthoom because of the travel lantern and the emotional spectrum and everything, but also there should be a piece of it that's like, holy crap, the multiverse is real. That is just completely absent from the situation.
I can see that point.
Yeah, so I was just like, because they decided to throw Krona's broken screen in there, it's like, come on, guys. Like, you know what that broken screen means. It means Krona. Krona means the birth of... I am holding the issue right now. Green Lantern 45, or Green Lantern 40. The birth of the multiverse. We got Flash 123, Flash of Two Worlds, and blah, blah, blah. But the explanation of the multiverse happens in a Green Lantern issue back in the 60s when Alan Scott and Green Lantern team up for the first time.
But to be fair, they're probably only referencing that point because we remember that's how Volthoom first showed up with the Guardians, how he first interacted. His first appearance, as we know, Volthoom that's when he showed up in that first part of Wrath of the First Lantern. So I'm not saying obviously it has much greater connotations than that, but that, I think, from this storytelling point of view, is the main or the only reason it's probably in there.
because between this issue and the next issue, which we won't spoil that piece right now, these two issues, Sam Humphries is shaking the foundations of the DCU in general. And it's starting right here, like in the, third page? Yeah, third page of this one issue. It's starting right here, referencing the beginnings of the multiverse. What happens in the next issue, like I said, we'll get to that. But in this issue, they reference Krona, and that's the creation. So I've already covered that ground. But the Guardians. Okay, so we are on Maltus. We are on Maltus 297? 297 days? Is that it?
Something like that. Let me see.
Day 255. And let me see. Day 257. I don't see a day after 255.
Yeah, 255. Well, 255 must have been the day when everything went to crap. No, yeah, 257 is when the Guardians are all strewn out. So, yeah.
And then after that, nothing.
No.
So 257 or so days. It takes almost a year, by our reckoning, for the Guardians to go from Malthusians to stature Guardians. Okay? That means, based on the timeline that we do know, so Mark and I appeared on an episode of the Secret Origins podcast where we were covering the origin of the Guardians. You remember that whole story, right?
Yes.
It was complicated as F, but the Guardians had billions and billions and billions of years before they even got to the point where they then started to become and evolve into the short little diminutive beings that we know now. So how long has all of this been going on? What if we're saying that this is 10 billion years ago here, just in terms of Maltus and the OG 7 Lanterns, how much older is Maltus and the Guardians? What is now their retconned history like? Is their planet only a billion years old? Because don't forget, in continuity, so far as we know, the evolution of Maltus took place much faster than most other planets. Like, they were created, but then the amount of time it took for them to go from like cavemen to just like brilliant beings is not the same process of evolution, the same lapse in time as most other evolved planets. It took a much shorter time for them. So even taking that into account, though, how long has Maltus been around? So we're throwing off not just what's been going on with the creation of the multiverse. We're also throwing off the timeline of the Guardians themselves, the Malthusians. So I'm curious about, okay, what's this new timeline supposed to kind of be? What's the effects of saying what we're saying here in terms of their own planet and their own history? Have they already split from the Zamorans? Have they already split from the Controllers? When did that war happen? Or even if it was just a difference of ideas and they're just like, F you, we don't want to deal with you. Okay, bye. Like, even if it wasn't the big war that we were led to believe it was in that Secret Origins issue you and I talked about with Ryan all those that year or so ago, then how long is this new timeline for Malthusians? Because they had to have split. The Zamorans and the Controllers, at the very least, had to have already split from this culture before this point. Right?
I would say so, yes.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, on the page where these three Guardians are just basically passing a judgment, hey, Raimi can work with Volthoom. Remember you making a big issue of the fact that Volthoom, in the guise of Raimi, was like, a female Guardian? What?
Yeah, you're right. They're Sade. Or a Sade looking like Guardian, yes.
There's a female Guardian.
Yep.
So there's a continuity issue within its own series right now. So that's interesting. But outside of that, artistically, I wish they wouldn't have included the shards in Raimi's hand when he's holding these rings, because it makes it almost look like he hit the travel lantern with this hammer and out popped some rings, as opposed to he forged each individual one. Because he's still holding like shards and dust and stuff of the travel lantern within the handful that also contains the rings.
They should have had like the ones that didn't quite work out, so they could have been like a red one and a yellow one. It's like, damn, I'll stick with green because it's the only one I can make without destroying it. It's like
the universal ring from Planet of the Apes.
These 10 commandments for all. Oops. Yes, so that kind of thing.
So that's all very interesting to me. And just as a kind of side note / nudge in the direction of the next issue and those spoilers, we have a plant elemental of sorts. That's a very, very cattywampus way of getting to what I would be getting to. But anyways. But yeah, that's just in this one issue alone, he is throwing a wrench into the history of the DCU. Like he wasn't already. We already talked about several episodes back when we were talking about the fact that, okay, wait, these 7 lanterns exist, and then they retired the rings, and then that must mean they created the Manhunters, and then brought back the Guardians. Is that what we're saying? Or brought back the Green Lantern Corps? Is that what we're saying now? So now we have this whole new wrinkle before even all that takes place. So it's like, what is happening? Did Dr. Manhattan steal some years here too?
The whole timeline will be set right eventually. No.
I just wanted to vent on those particular instances. I don't know what you think of all that, or if any of it matters to you the same way it does to me, but it's just like, what? What are we saying? What is happening?
Yeah, and why is Raimi like still dressing so unique? I mean, they're all wearing dresses. By the time we're getting to the end, they're all friggin' wearing dresses, right? So why is he still able to like be unique? That's why he was exiled, because he wanted to keep wearing some pants. Androgyny or no? It's like, oh, okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. This is just. What do you have to say about the issue?
Like I said, if you just read it as a story, it's interesting. I think they do a better, depending on what one's expectation was, I should say, that they do a better job at kind of giving you a more balanced picture, even though I guess this is in a way, this is really Raimi's version, and the last issue was really Volthoom's version of history when it comes to history. But so clearly we don't know if this is really all true anyway, because this is just Raimi's version of the reality. I guess we're supposed to accept Raimi's version of reality a little bit, slightly more than Volthoom's, but still, I mean, you still get some good elements of Volthoom as far as the positive aspects of him, and then you get basically how he was corrupted, or because of the direct ties being channeled directly into the emotional spectrum. I like the issue. I like the arc. I like the first Lantern, and I still like the fact that again, we talked about this before. This is like a perfect character for Humphreys to get, regardless of like closing your eyes and just drawing stuff on the wall when it comes to the history of the Green Lantern universe now. But the idea just from this one character's perspective, that he's the perfect character for Humphreys to get, because he really was essentially a blank slate as far as Who am I? Why am I here? That kind of thing was never answered really before. So, and in the way, like we talked about earlier tonight, the fact that they're kind of filling in a lot of the blanks about Volthoom, but at the same time they seemingly are laying a lot of breadcrumbs for others to explore more about who sent the first Lantern Ring and why they sent it to begin with, since it just kind of popped up mysteriously when the Great Heart was kind of formed. It's also good.
It's also interesting. I feel like they're kind of laying seeds in this issue here towards. I mean, not that they didn't do it in that kind of Volthoom Secret Origin issue that we covered a while back, but also like in this issue, they're kind of laying some seeds for you to feel some sympathy for Volthoom, because you can see through Raimi's perspective. Raimi's like, look, man, most of this is not your fault. You are mainlined into the emotional spectrum. Like, we need to help you. So I'm wondering how much sympathy Raimi has for Volthoom and what he's going through. Or is he just so ancient and old now that initially he may have felt some sympathy for Volthoom, and now he's just like, shit, this guy again? Like, let's get on with it.
Well, I'm pretty sure he was showing some sympathy even earlier in the Phantom Lantern arc, but now they mind sucked him and everything else. I bet you there's not a whole lot of sympathy left. Assuming Raimi is even back in there yet, because remember he pulled him into that energy ball, so who knows where that thing is? It could just it could be a soulless body at this point. It's a quest for Raimi's soul coming soon. So he probably won't be as, I had a lot of sympathy for you. Now up yours, buddy.
All right. Anything else you want to say about this one?
Up to this point, it certainly was a good setup for this arc. Of course, we beat that drum every 4 months we beat that drum when they showed a new arc in these books. The setup's really good. Just like so far, the setup for Fracture has been really good. But how it ends up, we can almost take it to the bank. We know it's not. It's going to be slightly less good. But so far, I like this. I like a lot of the focus on the Phantom Lantern, the First Lantern, even Raimi. I kind of like that. But it comes back again to the kind of like the flaws in the book, that when the book is more just about Jessica and Simon, it isn't nearly as thrilling. Especially when it's about Simon. Jessica at least is interesting. I still think Simon is a hell of a lot of dead weight in this book for the most part, and giving him his little emerald sight and other crap to try to make him special doesn't change the fact that he's still kind of an arrogant punk in this Green Lanterns series version of Simon Baz. So I don't know. I just don't. But I like it. I like for what this arc has been so far. I like it. I like Fracture. I don't have as much confidence once Fracture ends, just because of the fact that they're never going to be rolling into the New Gods again, which could be all right. I mean, I was surprised with Godhead. It was much better than it had any right to be. So maybe I'll be surprised again, but I don't care at all about the New Gods. So it's not exactly we're not going in with hitting the ground running as far as I'm concerned.
All right. I want to move on to some Twitter feedback.
What the hell? Sure.
Okay, so rather than like jump around and trying to figure out where I left off and everything, maybe we should just throw the spoiler tag in here. Do you want to say what happened, or kind of the reveal that happens in 27?
Go ahead if you want. I mean, because you...
Okay, so if you guys don't want to hear this going forward, I have a feeling most of you won't care, but on the off chance that you do, spoiler warning for issue 27, which we haven't yet covered on this show. Jessica and Simon are 10 billion years in the past. Shocker.
Yeah, everything is 10 billion years everywhere.
It's revealed they're on Earth 10 billion years ago. They travel to the center of the Earth at some point during this issue. What do you believe is at the center of the Earth early on in its creation? Does anybody remember what was in the center of the Earth during Blackest Night? It's the White Lantern entity as an infant.
Aww.
It is in stasis, just kind of floating there. It's not conscious. They can't make contact with it. But it's early on in the development. It's in its embryonic state, sort of.
Do they know what it is?
They know what it is, yes.
Okay, why would they know what it is?
That's another continuity issue. I believe the ring is telling them. I believe the ring is telling them what's going on. But anyways, but just keeping that in mind, because not all of these responses we got on Twitter are going to be about it, but we will get there. I asked on Twitter earlier today, what are your thoughts on the quote-unquote new origin of the Green Lantern Corps as shown in Green Lanterns issues 25 and 26? Okay, so Jesse responds and says, overall, I don't like the retcon, but the lanterns Humphreys created are cool. A white Martian is especially interested. Rob says it's pretty cool. I asked them both why they feel the way they feel. Rob responds and says the thought of the travel lantern and what it can do excites me, and I want to see what's up with Simon's ring. Jesse's response to my question asking why he feels the way he does was a little more in-depth. And he says, I asked him why he doesn't like the retcon. And he says, I've always liked the idea that the Corps was created after the failure of the Manhunters. I don't understand why the Guardians would create a few rings and then change their minds to use androids instead. Maybe it will play out in the story in a way that makes sense because of how the original Lanterns died or something. Honestly, I haven't ever been a fan of the first Lantern as a concept, and this is just adding to a part of the mythology I didn't like. I preferred when everything started from green and branched from there. However, now that these 7 original Lanterns do exist, I think it's an interesting twist that Jessica's ring is one of the originals. Reminds me of the part of Emerald Knight's movie when Hal's ring was one of the originals in that storyline. Okay. I had a thought based on what Jesse says, kind of like trying to predict where this story is going. Because of what happens to the Guardians via Volthoom, and the fact that Raimi is the one who creates these 7 rings, presumably without the Guardians' permission, because everybody else has just been decimated. And maybe he doesn't even know if there's anybody left. When these Green Lanterns show up to take down Volthoom, it's not like the Guardians haven't had a history of being ungrateful little shits in the past, right?
Right.
So I don't have a problem at all seeing these Guardians, whoever are left, going, we want nothing to do with the emotional spectrum whatsoever. We are shutting this down. And if not just that, the fact that Raimi himself was involved in creating it may even make them even more like antagonistic towards the idea. So I have no problem believing that they shut it down and opt to go instead for utilizing what is obviously a powerful power source, but opting to go for androids instead. That part, I have no problem making that leap. However, how we make that leap is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. If they'll even bother going that route. Because that's just what I think might be coming. But who knows if that's where Sam Humphries is even going. Like, do the Manhunters even exist? Like, did we just shut down the Green Lantern Corps concept after these 7 Lanterns and then bring it back? There's no Manhunters in the middle? Like, we don't know, right? We don't really know. The Manhunters do exist in this universe. We know that. Yeah, but maybe their whole origin is just now messed up.
I would have to think, well, again, assuming there's actually editors reading this stuff, that somebody would point out, well, you can't really get rid of the Manhunters for a whole bunch of reasons. and then the next issue, Atrocity shows up, like, skipping with a lollipop. Like, I'm so happy. Oh, my life is wonderful. I can just be a philosopher and just lick my lollipop. No. I don't know.
So Myron chimes in. He goes, well, we know time travel is in the mix. Wonder how long before she figures it out and realizes she, quote, had the power to go home all along, unquote.
She can click her heels a few times.
Myron also says, in response to us, our original question, I think it's the worst idea since the emotional reservoir.
That's mining pretty deep into crap. He goes to say that. Woo!
So Ralph then chimes in and goes, I haven't even started DC Rebirth, and I hear a lot more negative than positive. Should I even start? So I responded and said, well, are you talking about DC Rebirth as a whole? Like we're talking line-wide, or are we talking about just the Lantern titles? And he tags both us and Myron over at Blog of Oa. Myron says, for me, I've been reading far less DC books since Rebirth than I was during the New 52 and before. Ralph says, in response to me, I really only read Lantern titles, stuck on Long Hair Hal from the New 52. I read DC Rebirth 1 with Wally. The GL's titles just aren't appealing. And I said, Rebirth itself is much better than the New 52 was in an overall sense. As for the Lantern titles, how much do you care about continuity? He says, trying to create new backstories instead of. I said, what's happening now is better than Long Hair Hal, but suffers from similar issues. And he says, trying to create new backstories instead of telling regular good stories that move forward. Also, there are too many Earth Lanterns. And I said, more yes than no. He says, hurts to say, but Kyle should have stayed dead in Blackest Night or appear only occasionally as a White Lantern. Simon needs to go. Haven't read Jessica, but we need, and he ran out of characters, obviously, so he put a little skull emoticon.
See, that's a little harsh.
Well, I responded and said, I said, GLs may not be for you. They do make you like Jessica, and the stories can be fun. I recommend trying the Training Day issues because basically if you don't like those, you're not going to like the series. Because I thought the Training Day issues of Green Lanterns were the best ones I've read so far, personally. So, I mean, that may not be a universal opinion, but just based on the continuity issues I've had with the issue, I felt there was more fun in those Training Day issues than there were in other issues I've read.
And at least they avoided a panel when Kyle said to Jessica, well, I remember when Ganthet chose me for my worthiness, and which of course in the New 52 is borderline true, but we all know that's bullshit. We all know that's not Kyle's real origin. Thus the alley rat label.
It's funny, throughout this entire conversation, another person piped in and said they haven't read the Green Lanterns title. They've been keeping up with only Hal Jordan. And
that person was Robert Venditti. No.
Jorge piped in and was asking about that. But yeah.
Eddie Berganza would have been a better answer. I'm sorry.
So then somebody named Baird chimes in, and this is where it gets nuts. He says, I think it's pretty interesting, but the emotional reservoir was way worse in my opinion. Myron responds and says it's hard to get behind Green Lantern rings that function before the will entity exists to power them. To which I responded that the entities themselves don't power the core. They are more the first creature to feel said emotion that embodies the emotion but isn't the source of the emotion. And Baird responds and says, it's a really good point. I mainly like the way they're telling Volthoom's part of the story, but yeah, maybe this is worse. Myron says, I agree that the reservoir took away the whole way they are fueled in the first place. He says, Humphreys in response directly to what I was saying about the way they're powered, he says technically correct, but if the entity doesn't exist yet, how does that parse with the Guardians having purged those same emotions? Welcome to the can of worms. He says, Humphreys also doesn't understand that you can't have a white Martian GL 5.5 billion years before our solar system even existed. Now, we're talking about a comic universe here, so I guess we can say that the DC universe is much older than our real-life universe, because our Earth is 4.54 billion years old, and Mars is 4.5 billion years old, according to science, the scientific community in today's modern age and era. But this is what Myron's referring to. Barrett says, yeah, most of the New 52 stuff after number 20 I kind of ignored. Relic was a great villain, but the stories weren't that great. So I said, the time between Volthoom arriving, the Malthusians purging, and the creation of the first rings have to be what? Only a few years max, if that? And Myron pipes in with what we know. 257 days from the time the ring arrived to Volthoom losing it and attacking the Guardians. And Baird's like, looks like we're going to need a story of explaining Ion's location during all of this or something.
And the Guardians have to start looking for real estate for Oa at some point. When the hell did this ever happen?
Exactly.
We were just about to purchase this great beachfront property, then we all got blown up.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying. Welcome to the jungle, Mark. So what I say, and this is kind of like the last piece of the conversation. I say, so first came the White Lantern entity, Earth forms around it, then entities, then Maltus, then Volthoom, then Great Heart, then the ring, then Green Lantern rings? How old is Earth then? And what is the timetable between Maltus forming and the inhabitants evolving into the beings that become Guardians? Because in number 27, it says that Simon and Jessica are 10 billion years in the past on Earth. The White Lantern is in the center of Earth. Okay? So, it's a little infant. If the Malthusians at this point already exist and are starting to become the Guardians, that means that their planet had to have been created, evolved, etc., into the state it's at before Simon and Jessica even arrive on this planet 10 billion years in the past. Which means, how long has Earth been around at the point that Simon and Jessica arrive on it? And what is the lifespan of this White Lantern entity? How long does it take to grow up? Because when we see it, it's only a little infant in the planet of the Earth. But Earth is populated by all of these weird creatures. Not dinosaurs, we're talking weird-ass creatures that sort of resemble what we have now. Like there are like lava whales and shit like that. But anyways, that being said, in Blackest Night, we are led to believe that the first creatures that felt A, B, C, D, E emotion then became the embodiment of those beings. Now, the first creature, the first planet to evolve life, as we're told in Blackest Night, was Earth, which is why the Earth was formed around the White Lantern entity. That is the first place that experienced life. We all kind of agree on that point, right? So then stands the reason that the first beings, logically speaking, to feel these emotions would have to be from Earth. Because I remember seeing the panel when Ion created that it was like a little particle or a little microscopic being that first decided to jolt itself, to will itself to move. And then that just sparked a spark of willpower that evolved it into this massive space whale from its own little one-celled organism type thing. That had to have come from Earth. So the way the timeline exists based on how we know it versus how we're being told here, this Earth, even though they're already 10 billion years in the past, which is little over, like Myron said, 5.5 billion years older than the Earth really should be, scientifically speaking. The Earth has to be even older than that and had to evolve the life necessary to create the sequence of events we see in Blackest Night to get the entities that we get, Ion, Parallax, the Butcher, etc. All of the White Lantern, the creation of Earth, all of the entities, all of this has to take place before Maltus itself even evolves life or evolves life to the point where they're capable of feeling those emotions, because we're being told that the Malthusians purge their emotions. So we know they felt them before in the past. So Earth has to be old enough. Earth has to be super ancient. Like super ancient right now. Even 10 billion years in the past when Jessica and Simon arrive. So like, it's throwing the entire timetable out of whack for me. How long is the White Lantern a little baby? Like, did he arrive in our universe as a single one-celled entity life organism? And how long is his gestation period from arriving in our universe to becoming this little infant we see in issue 27? Then does he experience like a growth spurt while in the womb to become the being that we see during Blackest Night?
I don't know,
like,
man. You're making my head hurt.
see, this is what I'm saying. Welcome to the jungle. This whole mess, just by telling us 10 billion years ago, already throws a whole bunch into the whack that we went into before we even started going into spoilers for issue 27. Then you throw into the fact that Jessica and Simon are on Earth 10 billion years ago and run into the White Lantern in this embryonic state. That just throws the entire system out of whack. What in the world is this new timeline now? What is the sequence of events? Because there's only a certain way it can make sense if you're going based on the story that we know so far, how the entities were created when certain beings felt the emotion for the first time. That's how it was in Blackest Night, right? That's what they said?
I believe so.
So the first beings to feel A, B, C, D emotion, or I remember we kind of had this debate during Blackest Night on the LanternCast between listeners and Mark and Jim, and Jim and Dan and everybody. Like specifically regarding Parallax, was it that this bug felt fear or that it inspired fear? I remember we had that debate. Were these the first creatures, all of them across the board, to feel these emotions, or feel these emotions plus and or cause these emotions in other beings? I remember that was a big debate. But regardless, it still throws the entire timeline out of whack. So obviously this is a debate that was way bigger than 140 characters would allow on Twitter. And Jesse then responded later and he says, I think they should make Kyle and Jessica partners in 2814 in Green Lanterns and just make Simon a background character in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. So Simon just needs to be taken off the table for the most part, and just like, the same way every now and then Rotlop Fan or Stell or somebody's like in the background waving at you or something. That's where Simon's relegated to, which I don't blame him. Sam Humphries is shit all over the character of Simon Baz. I'll be honest, he's tried to bring it back, but I feel like he did too much damage in the beginning just to prop up Jessica.
Yeah.
So it's no wonder that we get so many people who are already asking us in Twitter, just like, oh, I haven't even bothered reading Green Lanterns. Is it even any good?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I do think it would be for multiple reasons, it would be smart to pair Jessica with Kyle. I think it would help the book too, because you would have the Kyle contingency that would, even if they're not reading Green Lanterns now, they would, because Kyle would be at least co-lining the book. Though, of course, they'd complain real quick if Jessica was still actually the main star. Oh, hell, they'd complain even if they were getting 50% of the coverage in the stories, they would be complaining. That percentage of Kyle fans, as I always like to say. Yeah, Kyle as a Green ain't exactly working out so far. It's not going too well for him. Though when we get into those issues of Fractured, I do want to cover that issue because that's a really good issue with him and Sora. I really like that issue a lot. I know I shouldn't, but it was... Oh, Sora.
Have you heard the news about Green Lantern's the title future?
The title future, as in for the book itself? As in
yes.
what's going to, as in the long-term prospects of the title?
Or the creative team?
Oh, Humphreys is leaving?
According to Blogger who posted this during San Diego Comic-Con, Tim Seeley is taking over the writing duties on Green Lanterns starting around issue 33, because they noticed in the solicits that issue 33 showed Tim Seeley as the writer. Someone on Twitter asked, wait, are you taking over writing Green Lanterns long term? Tim Seeley responds to that and says, seems so. We'll have more info soon, I'm sure. So it looks like we're in for a change of guard, at least when it comes to the writer of Green Lanterns within the next 4 or 5 issues, 5, 6, whatever.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean the direction. It means now. It means some direction of the book is going to change. It doesn't mean the main cast of characters is going to change.
Correct. I'm just letting you know that.
I know.
Yeah, there is a change. There's a change in the works, supposedly.
Which does not necessarily even mean it's going to be for the best.
True.
I don't know. Yeah, that is interesting though. It'll be. I don't know what they're going to do with Simon. I mean, he's a lot of baggage at this point, and I guess we should care a little bit more about him and his sister and Nazir, but I don't. I care more about Jessica and her sister and their cat. That's honestly, it's just based on the way things have been presented. Maybe because one seems a little more heavy-handed and one seems more natural, flowing, to me. But I don't know.
Just as are you familiar with Tim Seeley from anything?
No.
By the way? Oh, okay. So, what I know him most from is a series from Image Comics called Revival. He wrote, created, because it's Image, right? Revival, which was like a zombie type storyline. I remember Jim actually, for the most part, enjoyed like the twist in that, because for a long time Jim was like, I don't give a shit about zombies. Like he wasn't going to watch Walking Dead, any of that. Jim actually supposedly liked a few issues of Revival that he read. I really enjoyed the Revival series. I thought it was pretty good. I highly recommend you guys check it out. So I do recognize that name. He wrote a few issues of Suicide Squad. He also wrote Batman and Robin Eternal with Scott Snyder and James Tynion. He was like just one of the few things. He also wrote Grayson for 17 issues or so. So if you guys are familiar with the name Tim Seeley, that might be why. Just because I brought up news or whatever, did you hear about the DC Metal stuff that they're doing, Dark Knight's Metal?
Yeah, because I picked up that one shot. Was it the casting or whatever it was, the big one that came? Yeah. Whatever that came out. Yeah. So I kind of knew where they were going with the bad Batman or whatever. So I don't know if I'm still going to read that. If I'm going to. It made it slightly more appealing to me, kind of once you realize what they were going to do, but I don't know.
So they're actually there will be a DC Metal or Dark Knight's Metal Green Lantern in there. They showed an image during San Diego Comic-Con of that, and there will be one in there. What role that character will play, if it'll be a large role, if there's going to be like a Dark Knight's Metal Green Lantern one-shot, I have no idea. How big that character will appear, I guess, it remains to be seen. But they did show an image of several DCU characters in this metal type costume design, and one of them was a Green Lantern. So that's something to keep an eye out too.
That is true.
Anything else before we go into the emails?
Yeah, let's just. I don't think so. I think we can just do the feedback.
Awesome. Do you want to do Dan or Scott first?
I'll do Dan. You do Scott.
Sure.
Dan's from London, England, huh? That's pretty cool. Actually, we've had this email from Dan for like a little over a month and a half now, actually. And it's not because it's not that we haven't wanted to do it. It's just that based on the topics of some of these issues, it didn't really flow as well. So we figured this issue, since it has to do with, in general, both of these emails have to do with just general continuity and concepts of characters. So we figured we would probably have a little bit more time to spend on it. So Dan's email is, "Hi guys, I'm a longtime GL reader and newish subscriber to your podcast. I've recently been listening to some of the older episodes, and I've just finished the Sinestro Spotlight episode. And then everyone wonders why anyone would hire a person whose name means sinister as a good guy. And I thought I'd share with you my headcanon on the subject, though I'm sure I'm not the only person who has thought this. Sinister stems from Latin and originally meant left-handed. It took on the modern meaning by the Middle Ages because of the commonly held belief that left was associated with evil. If you look at which hand Sinestro wears his ring on, and at least in modern appearances, it's on his left hand. It's my belief that Sinestro is a nickname that Thal picked up at some point in his life because left-handedness is even more rare on Korogor than on Earth. Obviously, the nickname is an older classical Korogorian language that I like to call Old High Korogorian. that the ring translates into the Earth counterpart Latin as sinister. A for effort on that one, Dan, no matter what. Nothing evil about it, just an unfortunate coincidence. Keep up the great work, gents."
I'd accept that up until the point you get the notion that Sinestro's name is Thal Sinestro.
Yeah, I was going to say I could almost borderline, maybe more than borderline. I could steer myself clear to accept that, certainly before the Jeff Johns era. And once it became clear that his name is Thal Sinestro, and
Sinestro is a surname.
Yes, and that as far as I'm concerned, is that's his last name, and the reason why it just doesn't have the same meaning to other places. When you see Sinestro to us, we think, oh, now even if we didn't know the character, you'd think, oh, that kind of looks like Sinister. Well, in different languages and in different worlds, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, it's like Smith would be to us or something like that. It may not mean anything. So to me, we know that. Sure. That's why they gave him. That's probably why they gave him the name, or when they first created the character, probably. Come on, but as far as looking back at it in a Green Lantern mythos, or as in the actual worlds that these things exist in, no. I think now at this point it has kind of been accepted that Sinestro is his actual last name, and that's pretty much what I think it is. I don't think it's a nickname. It could have been, again, like we said, it could have been a nickname in the beginning, maybe even certainly during the Silver Age. It could have been even though it may never have been pointed out, but it may have been somebody's belief deep down that, oh yeah, that's really his nickname that they gave him once they realized what a crap he was. But I think now, no, I think that's his actual name.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because it actually kind of ties into what's happening now. Sora.
Yes.
Yeah. Sora, at some point, this isn't really a spoiler, she says, like, the phrase, "I am a Sinestro." And when I read that, I was like, hang on. It took me a minute to, like, understand what she was saying, because I was like, wait, what? What's happening there? It spaced on me that Sinestro was the last name of her family.
Yeah, because she mentions Natu and she mentions Sinestro, and how she's a Sinestro by birth or something, paraphrasing that. So
her name is Sorianic Natus -Sinestro, or Sinestro -Natu.
Well, she was born a Sinestro, but she was raised in the two, so that's why and she never knew what what her origins were. So, but she.
But now that she's embracing, her role as the leader of the Yellow Lantern Corps, I wonder if maybe she would start. And this is completely out of left field. Maybe she would start taking on that identity, like having no problem identifying as
good old SS,
or Sinestro hyphen Natu. You know, maybe she wouldn't mind having that name associated with her now.
I think at this point, if she was going to do a hyphen, it would be Natu hyphen Sinestro. Because technically speaking, Natu is the only name she ever really knew.
True.
So if even though she wouldn't be a married name, but either way, that will be curious. I kind of and I just again that's going to be more when we get into next episode when we do the Hal thing. We'll talk about this, it is just funny that how it's Kyle who kind of pushed all this upon. Kyle helped make all of this a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's like somewhere over in Quartz, and Nestro's like, "Yeah, good job." Oh, now she sees it too.
So we have another email from Scott, and he says, "Hi guys, it's been a while since we connected. 1.5 years. I've been in comics hiatus during this time. I was just wondering if the writing for Green Lantern has improved during this time. I'm listening to your State of the Green Lantern episode to find out if it's worth jumping on at some point. Let me know what you think. Thanks. P.S. Still missing Sean Engel. We emailed back and forth for 3 years. Maybe it's not a coincidence I stopped reading comics shortly after he passed. Looking forward to listening to you guys again soon." So, another reason I wanted to read this email during this episode, we received this on the 10th, so it wasn't that long ago. In this Twitter thread back and forth, we heard from Jesse. In this email, we heard from Scott, two guys we haven't heard from relatively in a while. So it was just nice to hear back from some of those familiar names and people that we've typically heard from a lot. Wondering where you guys went, but we're glad you're back. Another reason I wanted to bring this up too is because Scott also asks, "Is it worth it?" In addition to Ralph and Jorge over on Twitter going, "Is it worth it to jump back in?" And Mark laughed, and he very rightly has a right to, and I'm laughing too because of all the problems we've been reading about. It's personally
Smooth
probably not
sailing.
Yeah. Here's the thing, though. I think the answer to that question all comes down to how much do you really care about continuity? If you really care about continuity and things making sense within this prescribed universe, even let's just say F the DCU in general, just within the Green Lantern universe, if you don't really care about continuity much and you just want to get some relatively cool stories out of it, some interesting storytelling, maybe some good characterization, some, "oh, that was cool" kind of moments, it's not that bad. I personally, at least from that viewpoint, would probably lean towards Green Lanterns over Hal Jordan and the Corps, only because I agree with what Mark's been saying in the past about Venditti having like a lot of build-up but not really closing out these arcs very well. I feel like I came into the Green Lanterns title going, I don't care about Simon. I really don't care about Jessica. And now my opinion about Simon hasn't really changed much. It might have moved slightly in a more positive direction, but not enough to where I care about him sticking around as a character. But my opinion on Jessica has completely changed. I do enjoy her. And I think some of those stories are cool. Like you get the Polaris stuff, and you got the Training Day arc, and you get this stuff with Volthoom. And like Mark said earlier in this very episode, it was the perfect character for Humphreys to get a handle on because, for the most part, there wasn't really anything to screw up with him. He was a blank slate. So if you don't really care as much about continuity and you just want to read some relatively cool stories featuring a character or concept of a character that you're already familiar with and enjoy, I think this era of Green Lanterns is better than New 52. Well, depending on...
I still think it's better than New 52. Overall, because there were some good... Van Jensen's core run was pretty good. The first part of, I think, Jordan's run on New Guardians. And I like New Guardians even before he took over. I thought that book was pretty decent from its inception until it ended.
Charles Soule on Red Lantern after Milligan.
Yes, the second half of the Red Lantern run was amazing, but the latter, pretty much. I mean, actually, let's be fair. I mean, you hate to say it this way. Other than the actual Green Lantern book, a lot of the stuff in the New 52 was pretty good because we know Sinestro was excellent.
For sure.
Red Lanterns was really good from Soule going forward. Core. Van Jensen's run could have been better, but it wasn't his fault because he was under, the stewardship of Venditti, and just when he was finally about to have the opportunity to kind of make that book more on his own and less tied to Venditti's storyline, of course, that's when they got Deep Six because of Convergence. So really, being as fair as possible, it was really the Green Lantern book that was the most disappointing, certainly in the post-Johns era of the New 52. That was the book, really, that was the one that was most consistently not good, to be fair. So, I mean...
And that's exactly why I say it has to boil down to how much you care about continuity, because, and Scott mentions here about Sean. It's actually really fitting that he mentioned Sean, who we all very, very much miss and everything. So I do appreciate that, and I definitely understand you getting out of it if after he passed, if he was the person you emailed back and forth with so frequently. But any of you who've listened to Sean's show or interacted with Sean know that when you brought up something Green, he had a huge passion for Green Lantern. I mean, you have to start a podcast, even to keep one going. Like, yeah, Mark and I bag on it, but we love Green Lantern. I don't think anybody out there, Myron, Sean, Mark and I don't think anybody out there does these podcasts, even if you're being negative about the content that's currently out, because we have just this irrational hatred for it. We love these characters and concepts. That's why we do what we do. But when you told Sean about something, and I want to keep in mind, guys, I don't pretend to know Sean better than other people. I appeared on one of his episodes. He appeared on some of our shows. I listened to several of his episodes. I wasn't listening as they came out because, as I said, I was like, at some point, the LanternCast is going to cover these issues, and I don't want Sean's opinions to leak into my opinion. Then when we finally do cover these issues, those thoughts subconsciously I pass off as my own. I don't want to do any of that. But when you told Sean a concept that was happening in the current title, Sean's reaction, for the most part, was, oh, that's really interesting. I want to see how that plays out. Sean's gut reaction to most things Green Lantern was out of love for the character and curiosity. Continuity came second. And that's the way it really should be. But when people ask us questions like, is it worth it to jump back in? When I say things like, it depends on how you feel about continuity, it's because I don't want you to feel the way I do about these things. If you care about continuity as much as I or Mark do, you might be pretty frustrated with it. But if you really just want to go at it as its own pure storytelling and its own thing, I think pretty good. I think they're fun. But as Green Lantern fans, as people who analyze these books, that's what we do in this podcast. We review and we analyze and try and make sense within the context of the larger Green Lantern universe. Because let's face it, a lot of people who read these books today don't have the experience. What would you say the percentage is, Mark? Like, would you think that as large of a percentage of Green Lantern fans or people who read the Green Lantern books now, what percentage of them would you think have the level of experience that you or I have with Green Lantern?
I'm not sure. It could be higher than one might suspect. I don't know. I mean, I'd probably be at least fair to say it's probably maybe maybe 40 to 50. Maybe I'm being generous, but I mean, I think there's a lot of people that have long-standing interest in the characters, and even if long-standing to them just goes back to maybe the Johns era.
Right.
That's still a significant chunk of time now. I mean, Rebirth was what? I think end of 2004 into 2005, I think. Green Lantern Rebirth, I believe. So we're still. I mean, that's a long time ago now since Johns first started taking over the book. So that's a significant chunk of change even then, or just somebody from the Kyle era going forward. I mean, that's a significant chunk of change. So I think there's a decent amount. There's a decent amount of. I mean, there's a good amount of knowledge, and I would say there's a good amount of a good percentage of listeners, I think, who do know.
But that also leaves a huge percentage too to take into account that don't know.
Yes.
So when we review these things and when we analyze them based on their own storytelling potential. Now, keep in mind, Mark and I don't have experience in the comics field in writing those things. So we can only go so far into that process, and whether it's an actually good story or what the problems with the art would be, if any. We do our best in that regard. So we tend to focus on our strengths, which is analyzing it in terms of the larger Green Lantern universe, and does it make sense? That's our strength. We know the Green Lantern universe. So that's what we're going to compare it to. So maybe some people out there are pretty dang new to Green Lantern and don't understand why we freak out the way we do about certain things. So if you're one of those people who are relatively new to this concept and or don't care that much about the continuity and just want to read a cool story in a cool setting with some characters that are relatively familiar to you, or a concept that's relatively familiar to you, I think you're good. These aren't awful stories from that standpoint. So when Scott asks, when Jorge asks, when Ralph asks, if anybody else responds to that tweet after the show is done being recorded and asks these questions, do you care about continuity? If yes, maybe not for you. If no, they're fun stories. Enjoy.
Nicely put.
You had one thing you wanted to talk about before we wrapped up.
Oh yeah. It's nothing really major at all, but from this, I always try to look at things from both sides, and I think you do too. But we talked when we did the War of the Planet of the Apes talk last week. As lengthy as it was, it's almost inevitable something was going to hit me the next day, which usually it does. And the next morning after we record, it's like, oh, we should have mentioned this. The only thing, and we talked about the topic, we just didn't look at it from this angle. When we talked about how the apes turned their backs on Caesar, and we kind of looked at it from the Caesar-centric point of view and just the general pack mentality point of view, but we didn't really look at it from the apes' point of view, moving aside any natural like groupthink that's inherent in them based on their species or anything. To being fair, there were legitimate reasons why they were unhappy with Caesar at that moment in time. I mean, they had genuine feelings of abandonment because, being honest, Caesar did abandon them. He left his people to go off on a revenge mission in which almost nobody knew what he was doing except for his inner circle, who also abandoned the majority of the apes to go off with Caesar. So pretty much most of the apes didn't know what was going on, other than their entire brain trust wasn't going with them. So when they inevitably, well, not inevitably, but from a storytelling point of view, and something inevitably goes wrong, that it makes perfect sense that they would be upset, either because a small portion might think, oh, Caesar knew this was going to happen, and that's why he didn't go with them. That would be the smaller percent, I would think. But you could have a decent chunk of the apes thinking, well, simply put, if Caesar had left us, this wouldn't have happened. So then when they get all thrown together in the internment camp, that's really why they're giving him the cold shoulder. Plus, Caesar is beaten and broken inside at this point. He's not exuding any reason why they should rally around him. It's not like he's exuding, even by body language, going, yeah, we're in trouble, but I'm working on it. He was just,
yeah. That's why they only rally around him when he stands up.
Yes.
For that one ape that's being treated horribly in that.
Yes.
I don't know what else to call it, but a concentration camp. Or a work camp.
Yeah. When he picks himself back up figuratively and literally, and he kind of embraces the moral fiber of who he is again, and willing to sacrifice literally body and soul for his people, that's when the apes come back to him, and they come back to him really quickly. And the one difference between this and, let's say, Dawn was the fact that the apes didn't go to anybody else. They did not choose another ape over Caesar. Caesar did not have to establish dominance or fight to gain control of the apes again. So it's almost like they wanted Caesar to take control again. They just needed him to basically almost like show that he still had it in him to do it. And when he did, then they went back to him. So being fair, looking at it from that point of view, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that realistically speaking, it wasn't just shallowness. But even though we do know that it's been established in the three movies, there is a certain tendency to just jump ship when it looks like the bread's buttered better on the other side. But the reality is there was a little bit more to it from a storytelling point of view why that happened, and I think it's only fair to show because that shows some growth in them culturally from where they started out, that it wasn't just that they went to somebody who promised to be stronger, or they thought he was just weak and that's why they left him. It was the circumstances that led to it, and then once he proved by his actions that he still was who he was and he still cared, he didn't really emotionally, he didn't abandon them. We know, so they were able to overlook whatever the circumstances were that led to their capture and him going off on his own, and then they came back to him. So that's all I wanted to mention, just for the sake of balancing the kind of like the equation there.
It's actually it's fitting that you bring up that he abandons them, because this is something I wanted to mention in that episode. It's not super important, but it was a thought I had that I didn't actually get around to saying. But it was a thought I had when the movie got to that point where Caesar hands off Cornelius to them and says, "I'm out of here." The minute he does that, and they're all like, "Where's he going? What's going on?" And they'll start freaking out. I thought of that quote from Confucius, the one where it's like, "Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves."
Yes.
The minute he left, I was like, okay, I know where this story is going. Because he just is like, all right, it's payback time. And the minute he walks off with that gun in hand, that's the quote, that Confucius quote is what I thought of.
And you could go ahead.
I knew going into the movie, everybody, even what you were saying, this is because I think you mentioned it. I think, was it on an episode of Pre-Birth? You were talking with Jim about this before it came out. Like you thought it was going to be the end of his story, yes. Or was it something we talked about?
I think I know we talked about it when we did the preview, when we did the movie, our top 5 list. I know I mentioned why I was kind of like a little. My feelings were a little disingenuous about going to see this movie because of the fact that I anticipated him dying, and that's not something I necessarily wanted to see. Even though, as we noted, they handled it about as well as you could.
Right, and because you had said that, I was going into the movie thinking, okay, it's a possibility Caesar's going to die. But as soon as he walks away, and I thought of that quote, I was like, okay, yeah, at some point, for sure, Caesar's dead in this movie. Because, I mean, it's a famous quote. I mean, duh, it's Confucius. It's an ancient effing quote for a reason that has stood the test of time. But once you get to these revenge stories, boy, does it come into play. So it was almost like the minute he walks off, it's a foregone conclusion because of that. It's like he's done. There's no way. Now, granted, like you said, it worked out better than, or as well as it could have.
Yes.
But yeah, I was definitely expecting him to die for sure.
And
pretty early on in the movie because of that.
Yeah, and when you're talking about how the apes are reacting when he's leaving, that fed into the disgruntledness too, because of the fact that you could see why that would create a lot of fear, tension, and anxiety just when your leader is going away and you don't know why. But then when everybody who you would trust to lead you in case he wasn't there, which was really horrible decision making. Somebody should have stayed. Somebody in that group should have stayed because of the fact that they needed a leader.
Oh, you know what I was just thinking too?
What?
They're headed to this land that Blue Eyes
and Rocket. So Rocket's
absolutely
the one who should have
gone. Are the only
he knows
ones
how to get there. Yeah.
Exactly. Blue Eyes is dead. Caesar walks off, and then Rocket also leaves. So the two people who have seen this land and know exactly how to get there are also like, one of them's dead, and the other one's like, oh, I'm going to go help Caesar. Just go that general direction. I'm sure you'll find it.
Yeah, and I just think from in a way, Caesar, like we talked about, Caesar is kind of a product of two different cultures, and in a way he doesn't really belong entirely to either one, even though at the end, he doesn't entirely belong. He's more ape than human, but he still has a lot of those tendencies but that also makes him more relatable from the audience point of view because there's so much humanity in him and he's so human in what he does, because when you really think about it, he is the architect of his own destruction on multiple levels throughout, not so much the first movie, but certainly in the second movie and in the third movie, he really does. He opens the door for the whole can of worms. I mean, the Koba stuff to begin with. He dealt with Koba differently than
he dealt with Koba like a human. Isn't forgiveness and benefit of the doubt and stuff isn't all of that just a human concept?
Well,
why would an ape think of that?
Well, I think if you go back to the second one, I think he even says at one point he made a mistake with Koba. He made a mistake partially because he had this. He accepted that apes were different than people, as in they were better than people. That the same commonalities, the same infighting, the same inability to let things go, that was different with apes than it was with humans. And that's one of the things he found out. I think he mentions it when he's back at Will's house, either before or after they operate on him. That's one of the things that he learned, that the mistake he made was not being able to realize that Koba couldn't get beyond the pain and everything he suffered in the first movie when they was being experimented on, because he believed apes were better, and then he realized apes and people were essentially alike as far as the way they handle things. So there was that element, and yes, the war may have started eventually, no matter what, but we don't know that. We can only go with what happened in the movie. And then in the third movie, in a way, yes, maybe the apes would have been captured the same way if he had led them. They may very well have been. We don't know. But obviously, if he had not himself, but if he hadn't let that soldier survive in the beginning of the movie, he probably would have made it, because it was his mercy that came back to bite him in the ass, which I still think was a horrible plot point. They really shouldn't have had that happen. But nonetheless, unless you were going out of your way to try to play up Caesar's, his own weaknesses, it just seemed like it was not exactly the best message you want to. When you're trying to show that compassion is one of his strongest characteristics, you shouldn't have that literally come around and bite him in the ass at the end to be what kills him.
Yeah, when the whole point of the movie is for you to root against your own species.
And that was, and like we talked about, as this becomes Go Ape Part 2, that was the problem. That was the biggest problem with Dawn, because you're and the marketing for Rise. It's like you're rooting against your own species by the way you targeted these movies and the direction you were taking them from the beginning. You knew the apes and Caesar in particular were the main characters and who you were rooting for. So it was stupid to market the first movie with the first trailer that he was this angry, disgruntled, plotting ape when that wasn't the case. And in the second movie, it was even regardless of the marketing, it was really dangerous to have, oh yeah, the apes started the war. It's like, well, it's not as easy to feel. Yes, Caesar didn't start the war, but still, a lot of the apes were grunts. They were lemmings. They would go either way. It wasn't just Koba's inner circle that was bad, but a lot of the apes that fought for Caesar, fought for Koba, then went back to Caesar. So it's not entirely, again, it's not the I'm just following orders excuse. I mean, that's applicable to the apes too. So it's not just when you're having the apes be the ones to start the war. That was an odd choice too. That really was an odd choice, And I'm not sure what how all these factors played into how why the box office for this movie is across the board, not just domestically, but even foreign box office wise. This movie is definitely underperforming compared to not just Dawn right now, but even Rise. Despite the fact that it is a good movie, and despite the fact that the reviews and certainly critic-wise, it's the best movie of the three based on the critics' point of view, that I
definitely wouldn't agree with that.
I would have to think some of these things all factored into why people were not, and maybe just word of mouth that people were, like we talked about, people were expecting there to be this big fight at the end that there wasn't.
Yeah, that's what I would point towards the lack of people going to see this movie, is because it says War for the Planet of the Apes. I mean, and the images you see. So when I was at Alamo waiting to go see the movie. So you have the regular movie posters, they're framed or whatever. They also have, some theaters, they have like big cardboard standees of images. They had one of those for War for the Planet of the Apes. And that cardboard standee was like 3 standees wide.
Was that the one Caesar, again on horseback, but leading the apes behind him? Was that same?
No. This is the wall. This is the wall in front of the fortress where that shows a bunch of apes on the outside fighting up against some humans.
Okay. So essentially,
it's a big battle scene.
Okay. So
there's some apes crawling up with like some bows and arrows as well as some guns kind of interspersed through them, and then some humans in the picture. Like, it's a big like battle scene, which the only thing I can possibly compare it to what actually happens in this freaking movie is what happens towards the end when there's some apes helping the renegade humans fight the other humans. That's the only thing I can think of.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the only thing you were going to think of reminded you at the beginning of the movie when there's actually a battle between the apes and the humans.
that too, but this image doesn't take place in a forest.
Okay, that's your standee, you mean it doesn't take place in the forest?
Yeah, the standee I'm talking about. So the 2 images that I see associated with this movie before going to actually see it, first of all, I have my mental image of the title, War for the Planet of the Apes. Then I see Caesar in snowy background on horseback looking like he's about to ride into battle. Then I see this image. I mean, if that doesn't solidify in your mind the idea that humans versus apes, winner take all, I don't know what does.
That is true.
So I think it's because word of mouth got out that, oh, that's not what this movie is at all. And that's why it's underperforming.
I definitely think that's one of the reasons. I think like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a bunch of reasons here, because it's certainly not from lack of, critical word of mouth. So it has to. So if it's and it's not, and it may not be just word of mouth either, just because it didn't have a great opening weekend. Word of mouth, you would think, would tend to affect the following weeks more than the opening weekend, or unless it was extremely top heavy, where it had a huge Friday and then it dropped, kind of almost like what happened with Green Lantern, when it had a pretty good Friday and then just dropped like a rock on Saturday and Sunday. If it had held the same amount of money like it did on Friday, it would have made about as money as Thor did, but because it dropped, then it made slightly less than Thor, and then just continued to obviously go in the toilet. There are a bunch of factors. It was good. I enjoyed it. It could have been different. I think it should have been different. There were some choices in the movie I don't agree with, but I do, like I said, I give them credit for doing their best to respect the original franchise at the same time and try to connect the dots so that you could have a version or another, a universe in which a lot of this stuff could happen in similar, if not the exact same way.
Gotcha. I sent you the image.
That's the one I actually meant when I saw him on horseback. That's the one I meant.
Okay. That's what I saw, except it wasn't tall; it was wide. And that image too. That they are riding towards each other. So, that screams. It downright visually says humans versus apes. And that's not at all we got.
No, I do think after a while, I do think you can go to the well one time too many about false advertising or misleading, and I do think this may have been the one that came back and boomeranged on them. And as we talked about with regards to movies before, sometimes, and it's not like people didn't like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, but sometimes how people react to the part in a series, the previous part, greatly impacts how they're going to go, how the reaction and their enthusiasm in for the part that comes after. And maybe some people really felt they got burned in part 2 because so many things that you were led to believe were going to happen even in part 2, and the way they were going to play and the way things were going to play out didn't. So maybe that did affect the enthusiasm for this movie. Maybe part of it also was, some people didn't want to see Caesar die, and you kind of knew it was probably inevitable that he was going to die. But it is what it is. But at least regarding that point about the apes, I felt it would only be fair to give them their due, because there were reasons psychologically and emotionally why they would have not been happy with Caesar at that point. It wasn't just being disloyal or jumping ship when the going gets tough. So,
gotcha. All right. Well, as we crest the 2-hour mark
for this episode, we thought it was going to be super short.
Which is, we got a great conversation out of it, so thanks, Twitter. Thanks, listeners, who sent in all the feedback that we had this episode to talk about. Want to go ahead and tell people how they can reach out to us if they want to engender more conversation down the line?
LanternCast@gmail.com. Website is LanternCast.com. You can follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook, #GLCast to locate us on any of those. iTunes and Stitcher. Whichever platform you listen to us on, please leave us a positive review. And last but not least, 708 Lantern. Let us know what you think.
All right, guys. According to Mark and I's kind of reading of the situation, we can kind of do whatever we want for a little bit.
After the next one.
After the next one.
Yes.
Which is going to be Hal.
Yeah.
Hal in the Core.
If we do Hal in the Core, then based on our original tea leaf reading of the calendar, we should be able to, in theory, pretty much alternate every other week from this point out between an issue review and whatever the hell we want to do, or an off week or a spin-off or whatever we decide to do, that we should have leeway at least from now to the end of September. So who knows?
And my research is mostly completed, my notes is pretty much done for the next episode of GLGA. So I just need to find the time to sit down and record and edit that. So that may be one of the more recent, whatever the hell we want to do kind of episodes coming up pretty soon. So keep that in mind. I know we have a couple other ideas too floating around. I know I got to send Mark a couple of comics for one of them at the very least. Do we want to talk about any of those, or should we just let those go?
Yeah, let's leave because we don't have a time frame. So let's not. Maybe once we know we're actually recording it that week, we can let people know. There's still a possibility of some kind of San Diego Comic-Con D23 wrap up. We could do that too. I know Jim which I think Jim would be interested in doing that one too. But I know Jim might also could be interested in doing. Him and I going back and doing a toy thing, just talking about the toys and stuff, including, I guess, your little statue reveal probably would be included in that too. All the stuff that came out from Comic-Con. So those are all possibilities. But yeah, the good news is we're in a good place as the inevitable march to 300 continues.
And we did the math. We should definitely hit 300 this year. So.
That's really going out on a limb there, Chad, at this point. Since we're only 12 episodes away, numbered episodes away.
Yeah, before this episode posts, actually, I guess I can just add one. As this episode posts, I think it's 359 total episodes of the LanternCast so far.
Including all the spin-offs?
Between all the spin-offs and the 0 episode and the half episodes, and 359 episodes of the LanternCast as this episode posts.
Very impressive.
Total. So we're doing pretty well. So 300 later this year, guys. Numbered episodes. So that's going to be crazy. All right, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.